Dulwich Picture Gallery is such a particular place. It's a huge privilege and an honour to be its director. And when I was thinking about a topic for tonight's lecture, well, taste sprung to mind. Which of us has good taste? Well, I have impeccable taste, absolutely. Couldn't fault my taste at all. I like to think of myself as somebody who likes the finer things, loves art, loves music, enjoys a good landscape. Originally, my family come from Wales, so I love walking in the mountains. And all of that gives me a sort of confidence thinking, oh, yes, I have wonderful taste. And then occasionally, I'm challenged on that by my friends, by my family. Occasionally, I realise that perhaps I've got my own taste and I know what makes me happy. But what does taste really mean? Well, in the context of Dulwich Picture Gallery, I thought we could just have a look this evening at a brief history of taste through the lens of the world's first purpose-built public art gallery. And I wanted to start with a couple of choice quotes. I begin. A quote written by one John Ruskin, who in 1844 said he walked down to Dulwich Gallery and thought the pictures worse than ever, came away encouragingly disgusted. So that's an interesting start. What about Henry James, the great novelist who visited in 1869? He described a pale English light from the rainy sky, a cold, half-musty atmosphere, and solitude, complete save for a red-nosed spinster at the end of the vista copying a Gainsborough. The scene had quite a flavour of its own. I'm not sure I approve, especially writing about a spinster in such terms. I'm not sure I approve of Henry James. Let's find another quote. What about Robert Browning, who as a child lived in the nearby area, who wrote in 1846 of that gallery I so love and am so grateful to? Well, I think out of those three, Robert Browning had the greatest taste because he loved our gallery, Dulwich Picture Gallery. But isn't it interesting that three writers recording their feelings about visiting Dulwich Picture Gallery could have such different points of view, which makes me question my own taste, and perhaps I need to be a little cautious about making assumptions about what good or bad taste might be. So let's have a look at some of our paintings to test what taste might mean through the ages. I wanted to start this evening with a real favourite of mine, the Judd Memorial. This painting can be seen today in our British Portraits room. So if you come into the gallery, turn left, go to the very top of the gallery and then turn left again. We now have a room devoted to British portraiture. And it is a chronological hang that goes from our earliest paintings through to a little painting of Queen Victoria that I also wanted to look at this evening, a bit later on in the talk. And this painting is just fascinating to me. You can see, can you all see it on your screens, I hope? You can see what seemed to be quite a sombre looking couple in what appears to be a tomb. And the funniest thing about this painting is that it is a marriage portrait. This is a romantic portrait of a husband and wife. Yes. And the painting has descriptions within it, inscriptions to help us to know how to read the painting. It dates from around 1560. So it is effectively one of the earliest paintings in the Dulwich Picture Gallery collection. And when this was created in the 16th century, there's a feeling that words were necessary. It is, of course, the age, the great Tudor age of poetry. And so it's not a surprise, really, that within English portraiture, you might have a reliance on words. For instance, at the bottom, you can see live to die and die to live eternally. And then if you look towards the middle, the word of God hath knit us twain, and death shall us divide again. And my favourite thing about this painting, when you come next to the gallery, have a look at its original frame, which I don't illustrate tonight in this picture. But the frame has an original inscription on it too, also written in English, which reads, "When we are dead and in our graves, and all our bones are rotten, by this shall we remembered be, when we should be forgotten." So the meaning of this painting is about a life after death. Let's be remembered by art when we should be forgotten. And if we look at the symbolism within the painting, the two hands are coming together over a skull, are uniting a marriage between two houses. You can see the coats of arms to the top left and the top right. Mr. Judd takes his new wife and they join hands over a skull as a reminder of the shortness of life. Now, the corpse is a little harder to explain. Seems very strange indeed. It makes you think that this is perhaps set in a mausoleum. And it is thought that this indicates some sort of reference to the ancestors of both of this couple. So a reminder of how short life is, and also a memory of those that have gone before. And then the joining of the hands gives a hope of future progeny that might come from this union. But above their hands directly, there is a candle. And you can see that that candle has burnt probably beyond halfway down. So time is short. Life is short, art is long. This painting remains in our consciousness today in Dulwich Picture Gallery, long after the people depicted have left this earth. But how can we judge a painting like this in terms of taste? People often laugh at this painting. It seems so strange. It seems so quirky. It certainly doesn't seem romantic. And there is something so sort of old-fashioned about it. If we think of this date, 1560, Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel is in place already in Rome. Art has surpassed all boundaries of what you might think is humanly possible. And yet here we have something that looks a little bit awkward with words to explain it, and it feels strange and odd. As a Dutch art historian said to me recently, well, it's just so British. And he sort of laughed at it in that way. Then we had a visit recently from Her Majesty the Queen of Denmark, who you might have seen has then, subsequent to her visit to Dulwich Picture Gallery, hopefully nothing to do with her visit to Dulwich Picture Gallery, has stepped back from her role as Queen of Denmark. And she burst out laughing when she saw this painting. But then she started looking at the symbols within it and saying, well, hold on a minute, this was a wool merchant. And is he thinking here somehow about his position? Is he positioning himself in terms of power? Is this about trade? And are those two little strange sort of ceramic pots on the top of the wooden piece of furniture, are they alluding somehow to bags of wool or something? Is this all about money? It's funny how we come at reading a painting and how we might layer on sort of assumptions or expectations. But what stands for me is, if we're thinking of taste, well, this is a portrait that was paid for in the 1560s. This would have been the epitome of good taste, to have a marriage portrait made that you would hang in your own house. And yet today, it just seems like something so from the past, so different, so odd, so layered with poetic meaning, that I'm not even sure we could say whether it's in good taste or bad taste, because if we do that, then we're putting on top of it our own contemporary ideas. I certainly wouldn't have a portrait made with my husband which would include a dead body. So taste is something that can be deeply subjective, but also can be very interesting when we're looking at history. And it was something that really informed the creation of Dulwich Picture Gallery. I think a lot of you on this lecture this evening know the history of the gallery, perhaps far better even than me as its director, because it is the sort of place that is so unusual that if you like the gallery, then you have probably read up a bit on how it came to be. Such a strange thing, an art gallery in southeast London, the first art gallery that was built to be an art gallery. Not a palace or a church that was then turned into a museum or gallery, but instead a bespoke building created for the sole purpose to show pictures for the inspection of the public. And these two gentlemen here are our founders, the founders of this idea to create an art gallery for the inspection of the public. We have Noel d'Esenphon and Francis Bourgeois. Noel d'Esenphon on the right was an art dealer, celebrated, known as a businessman. And on the left, Francis Bourgeois was his protege. He was an artist, the two of them were friends, and they worked together in business as art dealers. And as art dealers working predominantly out of London, they couldn't have been better timed. If you think in the aftermath of the French Revolution, the art market was flooded with treasures from within France. And d'Esenphon and Bourgeois were canny. They bought up pictures as if there were no tomorrow. And they were incredibly fortunate because they gained a major commission from the King of Poland, Stanislaus August Poniatowski. The King of Poland commissioned d'Esenphon and Bourgeois to build up an art collection fit for a king. Stanislaus August believed that the Polish royal collection was not good enough, that it didn't stand up to the great European princely collections. And so he asked these two men to scour the continent and to buy as many masterpieces as possible. And they did that speculatively for 5 years, from 1790, this perfect moment when there were so many artworks to buy. But crucially, they were not paid for their endeavours. In 1795, Poland was annexed by its more powerful neighbours. Stanislaus August Poniatowski was deposed, he was king no longer, and he had not paid these two men for their endeavours. And so they were stuck with an art collection on their hands and no home for it. And so they came up with the idea to create an art gallery, ostensibly for us. And what is that all about? Well, ultimately, it comes down to an idea of taste. They believed that they had great taste. They wrote about it, they spoke about it. It actually made them enemies because they were so convinced that their taste was superlative and their taste was very French. And French collectors knew what they were doing. And they were heard to say that perhaps English collectors were not as discerning. This did not make them friends in this country. And in fact, when they took the idea of a public art gallery to the British government, the government turned them down and said they were not interested in accepting a gift of the paintings that they had in their care in order to create an art gallery for the public, an idea of a sort of national gallery. And my suspicion is that that comes down to a sense of taste, because the British politicians were thinking, well, who are these two upstarts who've been saying all around that English collectors are not as discerning as the French? And so politically, they weren't positioning themselves in a very strong place. So that, in a nutshell, is the foundation of a gallery that is all grounded on taste. And if we want to look at what exactly d'Esenphon and Bourgeois meant when they said they were buying the best of the best, well, we can sum it up with this. The Girl at a Window by Rembrandt. Those of you on the lecture this evening who have met me will have heard me describe this painting in a very particular way. I call her the Mona Lisa of London. You cannot come to London and not see Our Girl at a Window. Such a global masterpiece. Why do I say that? What position do I have to say that I believe this is as good as the Leonardo da Vinci masterpiece of the Mona Lisa? Well, it's grounded in my idea of my taste as an art historian. I'm a Dutch and Flemish specialist. I've worked with some of the greatest art collections in the world, and I believe this to be in the top 10 paintings in the whole world. It is such a special masterpiece. For d'Esenphon and Bourgeois, they agreed. They didn't know me, I'm being anachronistic, but they knew that this was a very important painting. But they were also collecting, amassing paintings together with their particular patron in mind. They were trying to suit the aspirational taste of the King of Poland. And if you visit Warsaw today, you can get a sense of the gaps that they were trying to fill. If, for instance, you were to go to the Royal Castle Museum in Warsaw, where we went just a few months ago with the patrons of Dulwich Picture Gallery, our Desempon circle of supporters of the gallery, we went on a special trip to go and see what might have been, to go and see the art collection, the old Polish Royal Art Collection, and to see what paintings our collection might have hung together with, had the King of Poland not been deposed. Our girl at a window would have hung with this, a girl in a picture frame. Imagine. So Desempon and Bourgeois knew Stanislaus August's taste, and they knew that Rembrandt was a top artist. In the late 18th century, if you wanted a great art collection, you wanted to have a Rembrandt. And these works would have hung together. So they weren't just amassing paintings that they thought were of the highest quality. They were trying to second guess the taste of the Polish king. Isn't that an interesting thing? If you would like to see these paintings together, you might like to go to Vienna this autumn, because at the Kunsthistorische Museum in Vienna, there is going to be a Rembrandt exhibition within which our girl at a window, she's packing her bags, she's going on her holidays to go on loan to Vienna, and it will be hung, our painting will be hung alongside this painting from Poland. So all these years later, what might have been in 1795 suddenly, finally comes to fruition in 2024. I'm certainly going to go across to Vienna to see that incredible moment. Why was Rembrandt so very popular in the 18th and early 19th century? What is it about a Dutch 17th century painter that made him stand out so much? You might know the artist Vermeer, who is so popular today. You might know that in the 18th century, he was pretty much unknown. But Rembrandt, to have a Rembrandt was something very special. In fact, in 1811, the Prince Regent, who was to become King George IV, bought this Rembrandt, the shipbuilder and his wife, for the colossal sum of 5,000 guineas. Nobody had ever spent so much before on a painting. George IV can be thought of as a bit of a tastemaker. If he walked into an auction house or sent his representatives to go and bid on paintings, immediately the prices would go up, 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 because people wanted to buy like the king or like the regent. In this instance, to have bought this Rembrandt for 5,000 guineas was a remarkable thing. But that was 1811. Desempon and Bourgeois had already bought The Girl at a Window that is today in the Dulwich Picture Gallery collection. I would argue that Desempon and Bourgeois, the founders of Dulwich Picture Gallery, were tastemakers themselves. And when it comes to an idea of taste, well, I didn't want to just talk about our paintings at Dulwich Picture Gallery. I thought we could talk about the building itself. What a strange thing it is to have a building, an art gallery, that is a standalone gallery set amongst 3 acres of greenery. There was a description recorded of the gallery where a visitor stated that Dulwich Gallery was picked by Bourgeois, that Dulwich was picked as a location by Bourgeois because it was the perfect distance from London. The distance was moderate and the country about it delightful. Well, having wandered into Dulwich Village today from the gallery to go and get my lunch, I just stopped for a moment and breathed the air and looked around at the houses and thought, what a special place Dulwich Village still is. A moderate distance from London, and the country about it is delightful. And yet it's only 15 minutes on the train from London Victoria. How fortunate that we are, those of us who spend a lot of time in Dulwich. So picking Dulwich as a location was an interesting choice, but it made a lot of sense for Desempon and Bourgeois. They knew that there was an early English collection that belonged to Dulwich College. The Judd Memorial painting that I began with, for instance, was part of the early collection that was held by the school. And so they thought, well, let's decide to ask our friend, Sir John Soane, the great architect, to create a fit-for-purpose building, single story, to house these paintings to greatest effect. And the design of the gallery itself speaks so much to who Sir John Soane was as an architect. And I find it very interesting as the director of the gallery. People often talk to me about Sir John Soane, and there's a kind of reverence within which he is held. People always use, for instance, Sir, they always call him Sir John Soane, and I think that's embedded in our mind because of the Sir John Soane's Museum, such a quirky and brilliant museum, his house museum, which really speaks to his imagination, to his personality. But there's a kind of reverence that we have about the architects of the past. So, for instance, whenever we're talking about things that we're doing at the gallery, there's a sort of hushed tones of, would John Soane, would he have approved of that? We're developing a sculpture garden at the moment. And when we were going for planning permission to the council, the planning officers were saying, but what about the relationship with Soane's building? And it was almost as if there was this hush in their voice, Soane's building. How do we think about the relationship to that? So we had some conversations with Historic England. And the heritage officers from Historic England were wonderful because they were saying, well, Soane was inventive. He was making up things, making up new motifs. The base of Dulwich Picture Gallery building, so you can see that we've got the simple bricks, the London bricks, which was a very clever way of creating a building with the lowest cost possible. So the bricks are quite distinctive because they don't seem to be very noble. But if you see at the bottom of the building, well, they're stone brought in stone. So an idea of it sort of having a classical feel, a solid base, but then the bricks as the substance of the building could then be a more lower cost alternative. And at the base of the building, there is the world's first use of what's called a shadow gap, which is a gap between the stone and the floor, which gives a sort of breathing space. It's a very clever solution to damp. But it's also something that Soane was trying to copy from what he had seen on his travels. In the 18th century, if you wanted to be a great artist or architect, it was thought that you had to do the grand tour. You had to travel. You had to prove your mettle. You had been to Rome, you'd been to Florence. If you were lucky, you also went to the Netherlands and Germany and spent some time in France. And then you could quote from classical architecture, and that somehow made you seem to have the greatest taste because you had seen how it was done on the continent. What makes Soane so very clever is that he borrowed lots of motifs from classical architecture and then he made them completely his own. He wasn't afraid to put his own personality, his own spin on things, which then makes his work have a sort of enduring charm, which I think is what makes them so very popular today. It's interesting that this part of the building that I'm showing right now, it's the mausoleum. So within the gallery, I think a lot of you know, our founders are buried within the gallery itself, within the mausoleum. It's a strange and interesting fact, and I joke, but I'm actually entirely serious when I say we run everything past our founders because they are there in the heart of the building. But by building a mausoleum, John Soane was also showing his great taste. Because when he'd been traveling in Rome, he saw many examples of mausoleums in the buildings that he visited. And the thing he wrote about this was that a mausoleum is the perfect space because it doesn't need lighting and it doesn't need heating because its incumbents are not going to complain. Quite right too. And so it's the perfect way for an architect to be entirely impractical. You don't need to worry at all about the use of the building because it can be cold and it can be dark. In designing this mausoleum, Soane created the idea of these tomb sarcophagi on the outside of it, when in fact the sarcophagi, as we know, are inside the building itself. And then the very top of the lantern, that shape, well, I think you already know it. It inspired the roof of the red telephone boxes, later designed by Gilbert Scott. So there is such innovation in this building that comes down to Soane's embedded confidence in his own taste as an architect who had travelled the continent, who had borrowed his favourite things from the classical architecture that he saw, and then brought it into his own neoclassical and entirely whimsical style, which then created something that was incredibly new and distinctive. So taste is the thing that meant that Descamps and Bourgeois trusted their friend and wanted him to create this building. Taste is the thing that endures today when people say, this is a strange building, what an odd space. And people say, well, don't you know? It's actually the world's first purpose-built public art gallery. Don't you know? It's by a really famous architect. Taste is the thing that sometimes makes people hesitate to say what they really feel, because there's a sense that this is something very important. And yet when we really look at the building of Dulwich Picture Gallery, well, a little bit like the Judd Memorial, it's slightly strange, but I love it all the more for that reason. What about the inside of the gallery? Well, when our visitors first came to Dulwich Picture Gallery, they would have been amazed at a building that was devoid of windows. A purpose-built building, of course, therefore did not have windows along the walls. What Sir John Soane brought in was the top lighting from the lanterns above, which was thought to be the ideal way to light paintings. So when Dulwich Picture Gallery first opened its doors in 1817, visitors could see paintings lit from above, and it was a revelation, lit in natural light. This design has informed museums and galleries across the world ever since, from John Nash's design for Buckingham Palace Picture Gallery through to the Getty Museum in Los Angeles. And when augmented with artificial light, it really is the most special way to look at paintings. The perfect taste, creating the perfect light. And the paintings that we have in our collection, well, they really do well to be lit, specially to make sure that we draw attention to their quality. I have always been convinced that one of the greatest artists of all time is Sir Peter Paul Rubens, the great Flemish artist of the 17th century. And when 7 years ago I was asked to become the director of Dulwich Picture Gallery, I had two immediate thoughts. The first one was, oh, I get to work with Rembrandt's Girl at a Window every day. And the second thought was, oh, and those Rubens paintings. It is so embedded within me that Rubens is a brilliant artist that I am sometimes flummoxed when people don't enjoy this painting, Venus, Mars and Cupid. This is a painting that some people find repulsive. We have an image here of Venus squirting milk from her breast into the mouth of Cupid. It is a large-scale painting. It's the first one that school children go to when they want to hear about Dulwich Picture Gallery, and it's by one of the greatest artists that ever lived. And yet, we have comments on this painting where visitors say they hate it. They find it overwhelming. The fleshiness of the nude, the vulgarity of the bright colours. It seems too much, overpowering. So recently in our exhibition programme, we took that idea on. And we put on an exhibition where we celebrated all the complexity of Rubens as an artist. And we looked specifically at his depictions of women. And in this slide, I show the final room of that exhibition. I hope many of you came to see the show, which only closed a few weeks ago at Dulwich Picture Gallery. And it was such an exciting moment to build up some nuance, to show who Rubens was as a man, to show his patrons, to show his religion, his family. But then in the final room, we did what my colleagues described the breast milk room, where on the end wall, we had the origin of the Milky Way from the Prado Museum in Madrid. Alongside on the right-hand wall, Venus, Mars and Cupid from our own collection. And we tried to just celebrate this idea that Rubens was the most successful artist of his time, one of the most enduringly popular artists ever to have lived, and yet somewhat, sometimes, a little overpowering. We looked at the meaning behind his paintings, the symbolism, the fact that he wanted to embody the idea of peace and hope and the strength of humanity through his depictions of female nudes. And I was so proud of this exhibition. We put so much work into it, and we gathered together paintings from the finest art collections there are. And on the first day we opened to the public, we had an evaluations that we do when you come to the gallery. You fill in a form to give us feedback, and we see how it's going. And the very first evaluation that I read said, "The last room, ... This is the room that I'm showing you here. The last room, ... I hated it." And you know, it just made me laugh because I was so besotted for this exhibition. And yet sometimes, no matter how much context you can give to an artist and the artworks that they make, it doesn't matter. Everybody has their own point of view. Everybody has their own perspective. Everybody has their own notion of what is or isn't good art. It can sometimes change for each of us on a different day, depending on our mood, depending on what we want to get out of a visit to see artworks. And really, I have to remind myself it doesn't matter, because the personal response to art is everything. And perhaps there is no such thing as good or bad taste. Perhaps there is just art and ideas. So with that in mind, please keep that in mind. I just want to whiz you through a couple of other paintings. And as I do, just keep in your mind whether you like them or don't. You don't have to share that with me, but just keep in your mind, are these paintings that you like or not? We have this painting in the Dulwich Picture Gallery collection by Pinacker, a beautiful landscape, classic example of what was popular in England in the 18th century. And in this, it's a funny painting because it looks so elegant and refined. And yet in the centre, there is a dog going to the toilet. Is that in good taste? What about this painting from the 17th century, painted in Seville by the great master Murillo, The Flower Girl? This painting, oh, it's exquisite. It's up there in my heart, really, with The Girl's Window by Rembrandt. But people have written about this painting saying it depicts a prostitute selling her wares with the flowers in her veil. Is that in good taste? Other people say that actually this is Murillo's daughter, Rosa, just before she entered a convent, and it's a loving depiction of a father painting his daughter, and there is no sun in the sky. This is something I once wrote about this painting. There's no sun in the sky because Rosa, with her yellow dress, she is as the sun in her father's eyes. Does that make it a good painting? Would you like to have this on your wall? You're not allowed to borrow it from the gallery, but would you like to have this on your wall at home? Is it something that you enjoy looking at? Does it look too old? Or is it actually something entirely fresh and wonderful and personal? Well, there's something about the way that you can build up the narrative behind a painting. If you're telling a story, I love telling stories about art. And when we tell stories about art, there's a certain drama that we can bring in that can take people with us on a story. And that goes back again to our founders. They knew about how to tell a good story in the way they were pulling together an art collection and in the way they wanted it to be displayed. Not only the fact that they asked their friend to create the gallery to house the paintings that they had amassed, but also in the frames that they put them in. People often comment on the gold frames in Dulwich Picture Gallery. Some people find them a bit old-fashioned looking and quite grand. So many of our pictures are displayed in gold frames. And there's a particular detail that I've pulled out in these photographs here to show you that is very distinctive about our frames. Can you guess what it is? Can you see that there's a little lock on each of these frames? There's a little opening for a lock. Because Dulwich Picture Gallery has the first ever frames that had glass in them. Our founders came up with the idea of putting a sheet of glass within the frame to protect the painting. So if one of the collectors who was buying art from them wanted to have a dinner party and people were sloshing around red wine, it wouldn't matter because the painting is protected by glass. But if you wanted to get a bit close to the painting, well, you have a key and you unlock the painting and you open the glazing door, which is on a hinge, and you can get up close to the painting. Isn't that amazing? Look out for these frames and please, please tell me if you ever encounter in any other museum or gallery a frame with a little lock like this. You might see a couple at the Wallace collection. The Marquis of Hertford copied Descent and Bourgeois and put some paintings in frames like this. And George IV had some of his frames amended, adapted to be able to fit glass in as well. But it happened with the Dulwich Picture Gallery collection first. And I'm really interested to see where else that influenced. But what you will notice is that paintings of a particular size, so if they're not overly large, on the whole, paintings in museums and galleries today are protected by glass. It helps to keep secure conditions, environmental conditions for them, and to protect them. So isn't that an amazing thing? It started with Dulwich Picture Gallery first. Taste makers indeed. And we keep that alive today when we're displaying works like this. Next time you're in the gallery, have a look at our little Raphaels. So beautiful. I love that we have two paintings by the great Italian master, Raphael. These were absolutely top of the list for Descent and Bourgeois. They are tiny little paintings, but they needed to tick off the great names of artists when they were amassing these paintings for the King of Poland, and they had to have Raphael. So even though these two little depictions of the saints are so small, they would have been immensely relieved to have been able to add them to the collection that they were pulling together for Poland. And lucky for us that they did, so that we have two little Raphaels in the collection today. And they have perfect examples of the little locks on the frames. Please come and have a look at them soon. And within that has inspired a new book that we have just written at the gallery, Unlocking Paintings, inspired by the locks on our frames. It's also a metaphor for how at the gallery we want to be able to get up close and personal to paintings, unlocking the stories behind them, but also opening up conversations. What do pictures mean to you? Which is our approach to displaying and interpreting historic art at Dulwich Picture Gallery. So if you get a chance, please do buy this book. I really recommend it. Even though I co-authored it, I recommend it highly. Beautifully written. Best taste. But we have some really odd paintings in the gallery as well. I mentioned that I was going to talk about this, so I won't let you down. Just to throw in, we have this little strange painting of Queen Victoria, aged 4. A lovely little painting, a poppet of a thing, 4 years old, Princess Victoria. We're so used to seeing her as the Queen, as Queen Victoria, particularly later on in her life, in the statues that are all over the United Kingdom. We're so used to seeing her as a sombre queen in mourning for her husband, Albert. And so I love that we have this charming little picture of her as a 4-year-old, but strangely also dressed in mourning. She started her early years in mourning for her father, and then, as you know, the latter part of her life was dominated by her mourning for her great love, Prince Albert. But why on earth do we have this picture in Dulwich Picture Gallery? You will see this all around the UK. It's often reproduced in pubs. I was in a pub in North Wales not long ago, and there was a little print of this on the wall. It's a very popular and enduring image. It's actually set in a frame that has a crown on the top of it as well. Have a look at that next time you're at the gallery. It's so sweet. But why is this in the Dulwich Picture Gallery collection? Well, it was painted by the keeper of Dulwich Picture Gallery, Stephen Poyntz-Denning, who also, on the side, was a drawing master for Princess Victoria. And he made this image of her. So there's something in that too, the taste of the keeper of the collection, his access to the royal family, and then the fact that this painting then, sort of in memory of him, was added to the Dulwich Picture Gallery collection. And that status of the collection of Dulwich Picture Gallery is very important. You will know, I'm sure, that Royal Academicians used the gallery to copy from, to create masterpieces. So Royal Academicians came to Dulwich Picture Gallery and borrowed paintings in the early 19th century in order to find inspiration in their own work. So Dulwich has often been seen as the epitome of quality, inspiring great contemporary artists. So there's a confidence that comes with that, a sense that when you're in Dulwich Picture Gallery, you're in good hands, that there's something really great about the quality of the artworks on display, which informs what we do today in our exhibition programme. We've got a tradition in the gallery, for instance, of great landscape paintings like Jacob van Ruysdael. And in the gallery itself, we have a copy of this painting that we acquired not so long ago by John Constable, showing how he took inspiration from the Dutch 17th century landscape in order to create his landscape painting, which then informs landscape painting today. If you haven't seen it yet, come and see our current exhibition, Soulscapes, which is contemporary artists painting landscapes. And this example that I'm showing you here is by the artist Michaela Yearwood-Dan, who made this painting for our exhibition. The exhibition celebrates contemporary artists of the African diaspora. It is the first time that we have put on an exhibition like this, and this painting was made for the exhibition. We call the show Soulscapes because they are landscape paintings that speak to a sense of belonging, a sense of place. And all the artists in this show reflect on where they come from and what landscapes mean to them. Michaela created this work for the exhibition as the world's first ever soulscape painting. So not just a landscape, not a literal landscape painting, but a soulscape. And the idea of a painting that captures that essence of longing and belonging when we think of our homeland or a place that we have dreamed of, perhaps somewhere that we wish we came from, or somewhere that our parents or grandparents used to tell us about. And in this instance, it's so exciting to see these contemporary landscape paintings in the context of the Dulwich Picture Gallery collection, and to think, who are the tastemakers today? Contemporary artists today are chasing the market all the time. They want people to buy their work. It was ever thus. Artists have to survive by their trade, and they want to be popular. They want to be seen to being cutting edge. Of course they do. But they also speak to a history of creativity. And when you see contemporary art alongside the collection at Dulwich Picture Gallery, it's a very exciting thing indeed. The old masters in our collection were contemporary once, and so they are contemporary still today when we think about how cutting edge they were for their time. And it's a very exciting thing to then put that in the context of contemporary art. You might not like all the paintings in Soulscapes. You might love the paintings in Soulscapes. It doesn't matter. It all comes down to thinking about the taste of the artist, the context within which they're made, and then it's up to us to decide whether we like them or not. And within that context, the artists have also looked at the collection itself. So for instance, our great Gainsboroughs, I realized I hadn't put a Gainsborough in this presentation, so I thought I must quickly show you one. One of our great artists in the collection is Thomas Gainsborough. So clever as an artist because he painted portraits for his profession and landscapes for pleasure. And so wasn't he clever that he combined the two things? He made his money through his portrait paintings, but he sets his portraits in the most exquisite landscape settings, so he gets enjoyment out of creating the art. Chasing the money, just like contemporary artists still today. And there's a wonderful artist called Sikalela Owen in the Soulscapes exhibition who takes inspiration from Gainsborough. And with this painting, which shows her mother knitting, her mother was a nurse, and it shows her mother knitting during a break from work, is so moving. And especially when the artist says, well, she took inspiration from Gainsborough, because actually this portrait of her mother is showing her mother at one with the park within which she sits. So how the body and nature interact. And she says, well, that is all Gainsborough. Contemporary artists looking at the artists of the past, which then makes us somehow take them more seriously. When a contemporary artist tells me that they've looked at art of the past, and I think, oh, well, I shall take this artist very seriously indeed. So that's a whirlwind of taste through the Dulwich Picture Gallery collection, through my eyes. Hopefully by looking at that this evening together with me, I might have inspired you to come back to the gallery as soon as possible and to pick out some more of your favourites, or perhaps to trust in your own inner voice if you don't like some things that you see, and maybe to be inspired to collect more art yourself, or to think about what surrounds us in our lives, or maybe even to do some painting yourselves. I wanted to finish with a new work of art that we have commissioned to be a new print and greetings card for sale in the gallery shop to celebrate 70 years of the Friends of Dulwich Picture Gallery. And we asked the artist Kate Cronk to create something that was vibrant and exciting and captured what the gallery meant to her. And that's as much as we said. And she made this view, which if we compare it to that watercolour I showed of 18th century visitors to the gallery, isn't it charming to see how a contemporary artist today has pulled together her perfect hang of the paintings and then a whole mass of visitors enjoying the collection in different ways. And it feels joyful. We've got our Dulwich red paint, our distinctive red colour. You're in no doubt that this is a depiction of Dulwich Picture Gallery. It's so joyful. And this marks 70 years of the friends, the supporters of Dulwich Picture Gallery, who have kept the gallery going through thick and thin. And to mark our 70th anniversary, I thought you might like to know that we're going to be launching a competition. Because if you think that perhaps the paintings at Dulwich Picture Gallery could do with a bit of a change, maybe you might like to make a painting of your own. We are running a friends competition where the winning prize for entrance would be for the winner to be hung alongside the paintings at Dulwich Picture Gallery. So one winning entry will be hung in the gallery itself. If you're a friend of Dulwich Picture Gallery, watch out, we'll be announcing soon all the terms of entry for this competition. And the winning entry will also be turned into a greetings card in our shop. So if you've been making any taste judgments this evening, perhaps you might like to put your money where your mouth is and make a painting to hang on our walls itself and see how it fares, hanging alongside Canaletto, Gainsborough, Rubens, and Rembrandt. Thank you so much for listening to me this evening. I look forward to seeing you at the gallery soon, and we can talk about what is and what isn't good taste. Perhaps I should leave it in the hands of Time Out London, who last year voted that Dulwich Picture Gallery is the loveliest art gallery in London. They said it, not me. Thank you so much.